You're listening in on an animated discussion about the new Batman adventures with two experts in their fields. I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar.
And I'm Caleb Masters, your friendly neighborhood film critic extraordinaire from thecinematropolis.com. And today's topic is cold comfort. Joshua, I just have to say, every time we see Mr. Freeze, and I know we talked about this last time, but every time we see him, there's new developments with him. He's not like the Joker or Two-Face. I guess the Riddler, to a certain extent, does a similar thing. But every time he shows up, I feel like we get a new version of him who has similar but different goals. And his character, I don't want to use the word grows, but progresses either positively or negatively.
Yeah. Yes. He's definitely a different but more or less contiguous version of himself. He's a character on the move internally. It's very impressive, honestly. And those gears don't quite mesh up from SUBZERO to here. We'll talk about that more in a minute, but they're pretty close. And it's very impressive. And we will see that, low-key spoilers, but we will see that roll forward into the future as well.
Yes. Again, spoilers if you finish the episode and see that, gasp, Mr. Freeze's head is missing from his body. He will be back.
Big shock.
And in fact, Josh, I don't want to overplay my hand here, but I literally made a note when Batman says the line, "I think we've seen the last of Mr. Freeze." I literally laughed out loud. I mean, come on, Batman. Those words alone signal the opposite.
Yeah, it's surprising in a way that Batman's not more genre savvy.
Right. But yeah, so Joshua, let's jump right into the designs on this one. I know Mr. Freeze has at least from Batman the Animated Series and the first run, had a pretty iconic design. I just want to get your take on. I have generally positive but somewhat mixed feelings on this design, so I want to get your take on Mr. Freeze before I kind of lay my thoughts out there.
I really like this redesign. It's mostly a palette shift. I mean, whenever I say that, it's worth, I guess, kind of putting an asterisk next to it and saying there's always some subtle changes to come in line with the new style, just a flattening out of what was a more nuanced, hand-drawn, airbrushed look before. So there's always that, but largely this change is a color swap, a palette swap, and I like that it's a switch to black because this is a Mr. Freeze who is clearly in mourning.
Yes. Okay, so this is a darker Mr. Freeze. So yeah, I love how he physically kind of reflects where his soul is at. I don't think that's too on the nose because I actually like this as a darker, more intense Mr. Freeze. But I love how they keep some of those signature things about him. The dark red glowing eyes,
yes,
that we really liked was still there. And of course, you have the same voice actor returning for the deadbeat voice acting.
Yeah.
And we also have some good monologues in there. And honestly, like. This is the most nihilistic Mr. Freeze we've seen yet. I mean, he has no reason. His sole purpose for existing here is to, well, I would say burn the world down, but freeze the world's soul, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm pretty much a fan. It just he looks a lot bigger, and I guess given the explanation we get about his transformation. Being that he built his body, I definitely buy it. But I remember the first time I saw it without the context of that information, I was like, wow, he really bulked up big time since we saw him last.
That's a good point. You're right. Like, he is legitimately larger. He's quite a bit taller than Batman, even more than he was before. And, usually Batman's the tallest guy on screen, like with purpose, I think. But but he is smaller next to Mr. Freeze now. I would say my biggest complaint, if I have to dig one up, is the level of expressiveness that they gave to his face now. It is very almost cartoonishly expressive when he gets angry.
Yeah.
And I don't hate it without context. Like we've talked about how the animation style on this is significantly more dynamic. And usually that is great news for the action. But when it comes to facial expression, I feel like sometimes it's a little much. And I think it's especially a little much for Mr. Freeze. We've talked before how his claims that he has no emotions are not true, right? They're not accurate. But they were believable. Like, we could believe that he believed that. But if you're going to have this kind of like big cartoonish angry reaction whenever he gets mad, it undercuts that a little too much. Like, before, it was a subtle text and subtext, and now it's almost a gag. Almost. I don't know. I don't like it.
Yeah, no, I see. I see what you're saying, and I hadn't considered that. But here's the thing about the original design for Mr. Freeze: that when he was in costume proper, he really only has, what would you say, 2 or 3 different expressions on for his face when he's in costume.
Yeah.
I know, and that's kind of the nice. Again, I think what the thing I like about that design is when he's out of costume, you actually see him be a lot more emotional and expressive, like when he's locked in the jail cell and he's crying for Nora and things like that.
They do stuff with his eyes that you can't do with the big goggles on. Yeah,
right,
absolutely.
Right. Versus here, though, because of the animation shift, and I'm sure the demands of, you know, the new target audience, maybe, I don't know, but he is definitely way more expressive, which removes that sort of like chilling ambiguity. No pun, I promise that wasn't no pun intended on the chilling, but it's there.
No, that could be it. It really could be that with a new focus on actually selling this show to kids for real and not just nominally like BTAS did, that they went for a much less subtle depiction of Mr. Freeze. And from that perspective, I can understand the decision. I still don't love it because, again, it's just a little too too cartoonish for me, for my tastes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we'll circle back on Mr. Freeze's motivation here in a minute, but I want to get through the rest of the designs first. But I have to say, yes, in a weird way, this is a more kid-friendly version of Mr. Freeze from an animation perspective, but holy smokes, I feel like this is a way darker version of Mr. Freeze than what we had before. So, interesting choices.
I agree. And he was not light before. Like, he was a dark, tragic character before, but this just doubles down on it. So, but to stay on point with the look of things, and another thing that ties to Mr. Freeze, but I feel like is just a little too cartoony and over the top, are his henchwomen. I broadly like the look. You know what I mean? They're snow bunnies. They have parkas. They have skier style, like big cover half of your face sunglasses, you know?
Right.
And the icicle guns are excellent. We know Mr. Freeze is not going to hand his actual freeze gun off to anybody, but a gun that just shoots spikes of ice feels like the right level of, these are my muscle. This is what they do. They point very dangerous things at people and make sure that they don't move while I'm doing my stuff. All of that I love. But they are attractive women in miniskirts, basically. And I just don't think that that's remotely consistent with decisions that Mr. Freeze would make.
It just seems kind of random. I mean, aesthetically, I totally get it. At face value, animation, probably, I would say, and you could probably elaborate more on this, probably to some degree, comic book tropes in general. But yeah, like Mr. Freeze wouldn't have henchwomen in short parkas. That's really weird.
He's not into it, right? Like,
no.
It's a weird... Now, I mean, we can all do a little backfilling and a little work for the show and say he hired henchwomen and they chose their outfits more or less, you know. They do seem like they're having a lot of fun, the ladies that are working with him. So there's a little bit of backfilling there, but it just... And I do like that it fits with his overall, you know, aesthetic. That's great. That's what hench people should do. They should either perfectly match the villain's aesthetic, or they should be, in my opinion, hilariously generic. Like they used to have people in black turtleneck sweaters that said henchman on them in Batman 66. Like, I like that. Even in a more serious Gotham, that tracks with me because these are big theatrical villains. But it's just when you start thinking about the details that you start to wonder, who made these choices? Was it them or Mr. Freeze? And if it's Mr. Freeze, I don't buy it.
I have my hunch is that Bruce Timm, who got started drawing pinup girls, probably had something to do. Like, again, I guarantee you it was just at least out of the narrative, it was very much just an aesthetic choice. So they didn't really do much to justify it in the narrative. I mean, it works. I guess they're assuming kids aren't going to think that hard about it, but still, it just seems inconsistent with what we've seen before, for sure.
No, there's 100% an extra textual reason for it. That is, these guys aren't great handling women. We've been over it. It doesn't get really egregious until way later, but they're not spectacular at it. That's the extra textual reason. Absolutely. I agree with that.
So Joshua, I think we've covered the main characters. I think there's a couple smaller ones we're going to talk about, but the thing I really had to ask you about was, what did you think of the grappling gun design?
So it's interesting. We've talked just a little bit about the changes to Batman's equipment in terms of the boat and the Batmobile, and we're looking forward to the Batwing. But when I saw this change in the grapple gun, I thought we had to talk about it at least a little bit, because it looks completely different than the BTAS grapple gun, and that thing is so omnipresent, both before the redesign and after, that it had to be made front and center, I think. I like it. I think overall it's a glow up. You know, they streamlined it. It's all black. The grapple is now sharp and pointy and actually suggests bat ears, you know.
Right.
So I like all of that. I think it's more realistic. You know how often the thing had the big grabby claw, but it would still loop itself around stuff for no reason, you know, a physics-defying grapple. So I like that this one like sticks into stuff. That seems more obvious and realistic. But if I'm honest, and this is entirely based on, I guess, nostalgia, I really like the arcade grabby claw version of the old grapple gun. I don't know why. It's not practical. They didn't use it right, but just the look of it, I like it better. I can't explain it other than nostalgia. How did you feel about these changes?
I mean, I'll be honest. I thought I'm always one for pragmatism. I don't know. Like, I like that this definitely makes sense. Oh, it sticks into something. Whatever you shoot it at, it'll stick, or it'll loop.
Sharp. Now it works like a normal sharp thing.
Yes, or if you shoot it at a pole, I guess it'll loop around a little more. The claw thing, I try not to overthink stuff like that, but you're also like, yeah, but how did it know what to grapple? Like, you know?
Yeah,
like,
sure.
So I don't know.
It makes no sense, but I like the look of it. That's what I'm saying. I can't really explain it. I think I prefer this new gun shape, but I prefer the old grapple gun's grapple, except if we had the old grapple on the new shape, it would ruin the new shape. See, I'm a complicated man. I can't explain it.
Yeah, you know, hey man, it's okay. Sometimes you just like what you like, and that's okay. I will say I do like the more overall, like the streamlined look is more my flow. I think it matches the new animation style well and makes, you know, internal sense. So
honestly, it matches Batman's aesthetic way better than the old one did too.
But see, if it was an Adam West Batman, we would be having a different conversation.
Well,
you know,
you should see those old Batarangs from '66. They're stupid. Like, they're absolutely crazy.
Oh, man.
So before we move on into the episode proper, we've got a couple of, I would say, honorable mentions, right?
Yeah.
The easier one of those is, welcome back, Mayor Hamilton Hill.
Yes, I did make a note. First time we've seen him with a new animation style ? So I guess that would be answer is yes.
Yeah.
He reminds me, his redesign is kind of similar to Gordon's, where he's a little skinnier. Maybe it looks like they might have aged him up a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit.
No, I think you're right. I think that thinner look to Gordon that we don't love is part of what they do to older characters, you know?
Yeah.
Alfred is already so rail thin that they don't really do much with that on him, but with these other older guys, it does seem like they slimmed down some in their growing age.
Right.
But it still looks like him.
Yeah, and I just bet, I wonder when, and again, I don't know the ins and outs of like the art direction, but I'd imagine they simplified the number of body shapes they had down to maybe I don't want to say a template, but maybe it could be a template. Like
I think there are 3 or 4 templates, 100%. I think that's true. Yeah.
And then for some of the older characters, they're like, all right, we're going to use the shorter, skinnier template. So yeah, anyway, I mean, I think it looks fine. It still looks, it's like, again, similar to Gordon, where it's like, okay, yeah, that looks like him, except for a little older, maybe a little more decrepit, and a little shorter.
It's true, though. It's true. But I like seeing him because that's some really nice continuity that he keeps cropping up. I do wonder if anybody ever runs against him for mayor of Gotham. Maybe nobody does. Maybe not. I wouldn't be surprised. Who wants that job?
He has removed term limits, sir. He will be Gotham's mayor forever.
Well, but I mean, seriously, maybe nobody wants the gig and just isn't running against him. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like the city council comes back to him every time, and they're like, listen, man, after what happened with the district attorney and that Joker guy, and, you want to keep the job?
You're doing good. Just stay. Just stay.
The crime is thriving in Gotham under you. You deserve a second chance because we're all making money off of it. So, okay. Well, okay. Hold on. We have to also acknowledge little cameo, and I have to wonder like if this was like part of the plan or just an honest cameo. We get a little peek at Jack Ryder. At the very beginning, the news reporter, which, again, don't want to spoil things for listeners who might not be in the know, but Jack Ryder will have more prominence in the future, but not, it's like a while. It's not like...
It is a while, yes.
It's like towards the end of the run.
Of the whole run, yes, yeah. That was why I wanted to put him in the list, because I want all of you viewers who don't know who he is, don't Google him. Just be surprised. But I wanted to say, keep your eye on him. Pretty basic, handsome newscaster kind of guy right now, but we will definitely mess with that in the future.
Yeah, yes. And again, we'll talk about it later, but I have to wonder, to what degree was his plant early on part of the plan? I don't know.
I think in this case, they definitely knew that they wanted to do something with the rest of Jack Ryder's story, and so they started laying track. I mean, we've already seen this on Superman, right? Which would have been coming out a year before this, right? That they start laying the track for Inner Gang and Darkseid and Kirby's Fourth World almost from go. So I think this is a shift in the way that they're thinking about their show. They're not quite to that big continuity phase that they'll have with Batman Beyond and Justice League, but they're starting to think that way.
Yeah. Yep. Great points. All right, Joshua. So let's circle back here. Mr. Freeze.
The man himself. Yes.
So the thing I find interesting about Mr. Freeze here is I find it wholly consistent with who we know Mr. Freeze, like what he's doing here, where he's basically like, if I can't have what I want, I just want the whole world to, again, I don't want to use the word burn. Freeze.
We would say burn, but it's freeze. Yeah.
It's a freeze. And he's just going around and ruining everyone's day and plans to ruin the whole Gotham city's, so with that, his whole motivation is just to destroy things. Before he was a character who was driven by revenge and, the desire to heal his wife. And we saw that in SUBZERO, where it seemed like that arc had more or less been complete. He was, I don't want to say redeemed, but
not at all. Yeah,
but he had achieved to a certain degree. It felt like his goals had been achieved, that in fact so much so that he basically said farewell to Nora Freeze once he found out she was alive and walked off into the Arctic.
Yeah, farewell to Nora. Farewell to Gotham, farewell to Batman. He almost seemed, to me, satisfied with how things were working out at the end of SUBZERO. Sure, he might have wished he could have gone back to Nora, but he was okay with not doing that because now she could have a normal life again, And so that does leave us in a place where at the beginning of this episode, I'm a little bit like, but why is he doing this? And then once we find out, I'm like, this is the greatest, most on-character supervillain plan possibly ever. It makes so much sense.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And, hashtag relevant content. This episode came out in, I believe, 1997. But I do kind of believe, I like the idea that his core motivation of revenge driven by love turned to a sour, self-destructive vengeance.
Yeah.
feels very relevant in the 2019/2020 reality we're currently living in. Like, where it's not just any. There's a lot of different people out there. I don't want to specify any individually, but there's a lot of people out there where it's like the thing I want in this world is just not obtainable. And if I can't have the thing I want, I don't care about anybody. I just want to ruin everyone's day. I just want to ruin everything. And I feel like that is something that has become more prominent in the last few years. And I'm like, wow, that's also extremely bleak and kind of nihilistic, which is why I'm like, wow. Before, Mr. Freeze had a motivation, a pure motivation twisted into revenge, right? And now he just wants to destroy everything. That's way darker. He's just like, if I can't get what I want you all to suffer, you know?
Yeah.
That's twisted.
It really is twisted. And I mean, I think we can put the point on it. We're talking about him as a metaphor for fandoms. At least I am. So,
yes.
The thing that I used to love has now changed to the point where I can't love it anymore. Therefore, nobody gets to love it, except if you look closely at it, you're the one that changed, not that thing.
100%. Yeah, I was thinking fandoms, politics, all sorts of things. Like, it's not just one thing, but it has definitely, hugely becoming more and more prominent in fandoms, and it's really sad. It's really sad because those people make it all of it less enjoyable. I guess.
Yeah.
You know, like way less enjoyable. So, yeah.
Now, that shift, though, which I really like and appreciate. So this is not so much a complaint as just noticing when the continuity between BTAS and New Batman Adventures don't quite match up. Is that they insinuate very heavily. They never come out and say it, but they insinuate very heavily at the beginning of this episode that he does not come back to Nora because he was fighting this disease, right? Whatever the deterioration of his physical body is the reason he didn't come back to Nora, which is very inconsistent, I think, with the end of SUBZERO, where he walks off into the ice. I don't hate it. I think that they had a better idea and decided to massage the continuity to make it work for this episode. So I'm not really complaining. It's just, we have been keeping an eye on when things don't quite mesh. And I really feel like that's one of those, just a little bit of slipping the gears on continuity.
Right, and it's interesting to me because that change must have happened relatively quickly. I mean, I guess it was a couple years between SUBZERO and this episode, but this was one of the earlier episodes in the redesign.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'll be honest, Joshua, one of my biggest critiques of the episode, because I actually think it's a very, very good episode, one of the better Mr. Freeze episodes, I would even argue. But I honestly feel like we could have used another one. Either it could have been a two-parter, or we could have just had another one in between this one and SUBZERO. I just it feels like we're doing a lot very quickly, and I think the motivations and all of that checks out really well, especially. But I actually, when I was watching this, I realized there's about 4 minutes left in the episode once you find out what his motivations are, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
It's good, powerful, dark, sad, tragic motivation, right? But I'm like, holy smokes, there's not really a lot of time to really get into it outside of the fact that we get the information, where I feel like they could have, this is a kid's show, so it doesn't need to go super in depth, but I think they could have given it more time to breathe. Would have been nice.
I would have loved an entire 22 minutes dedicated to just Mr. Freeze ruining other people's life work, like he started it out as, with a big cliffhanger of him breaking into Wayne Manor, oh yeah, that would have been really interesting. I don't know that it needs 2 parts, but I would have really liked to have seen these writers cook up 2 or 3 more opportunities for him to ruin the life's work of others. Because as much as, I'm gonna turn around to Mel Brooks' quote, right? Like Mel Brooks, I think it was, said something like, if I get a paper cut, that's a tragedy, but if you fall into a sewer, that's comedy. And to flip that around, to watch Mr. Freeze ruin people in these relatively small but intensely personally devastating ways is really powerful. And if somehow him not getting to do that to Bruce Wayne was the reason that he accelerated into the, fine, I'll just flash freeze the whole city, and we'd split them up into 2 individual episodes, that could have been really powerful. That could have been very interesting to watch.
Right. And I think even if you had done, like, at the end of the first episode, in addition to breaking into Wayne Manor, that's when you kind of get the reveal that his body is completely deteriorated. You know, I mean, I just feel like there's more time to really wrap your head around, like, how sad and bleak that motivation is.
Absolutely.
And also gives, I think, the audience more time to, and Bruce Wayne, too, time to connect with that character, to kind of keep that sympathetic edge that we know that Mr. Freeze has. Not that he's not sympathetic here, but I feel like it's not as sympathetic as he was before.
I think he isn't sympathetic until we find out about his condition. And then we slip back into that place where it's like, well, that's not okay, but I understand where you're at.
Right. And the way it rolls out in this, as it plays in this episode, is it happens so fast. It's, I mean, you do feel bad, but it's like, oof, all right, well, that's done. Okay, now they're going to stop him, like, immediately afterwards. So, but no, still, I don't think it takes away from. I think this is a very great episode, but it would have been nice to have seen more, honestly.
I agree. I mean, I think we say that about Mr. Freeze almost every time.
Every time, yeah. So, Joshua, I feel like one other thing I wanted to touch on was Tough Dad Batman. Continues to ramp up in this one, and I know this is a point of tension between us, but we have to at least acknowledge. I have a couple of notes. One of them being whenever Barbara feels really great about the score in her training, and he's like, "Okay, cool." Literally just throws her back in without asking her or anything. He's like, "Go, figure it out," you know. And I was like, "Wow."
Yeah, that one doesn't bother me as much because of the space that they're filling in that moment. Like, he's very much the coach, and he's not wrong. Dead is not winning, but you're not wrong. It is still part of the drift towards a very stern, unforgiving, frankly unpleasant to be around Bruce Wayne. If it weren't for the other stuff, I'm not sure that this would even blip on my radar, but you're right. With the preponderance of the evidence, we're drifting away.
Well, because it's I think to your point, he does that, and then he immediately goes to like kind of have a sit down talk with Robin about why he failed the test or something.
Yes.
And I actually thought, I don't know, in the context of the story, I thought it was really funny that Tim threw it back in his face, and then Bruce tried to like dodge the conversation. I thought it was a funny interaction, but also you're like, wow, they're drawing attention to this and not really delving into it, which is kind of strange too. But you know,
that I agree with you. That is a very entertaining, like, little vignette between Bruce and Tim. But and I'm also prepared to say that this may be like Batman conversations in social media that are just wearing me down. But every single time I see anybody start talking some nonsense about how Batman would fight crime better if Bruce Wayne just paid taxes, I'm like, you guys, it's not real. You know, like, it's not real. He is a fictional character, and that city would literally burn to the ground, or everyone would be poisoned and die laughing, or a million other things if Batman weren't there. This is not the real world, you know? And as entertained as I am by Tim bringing that up, they never really address it in any kind of genre appropriate way. And so, yeah, with that in mind, it really bugs me. I can be both annoyed and entertained at the same time, apparently.
Well, and yes, no, I was more entertained than that. I just think it's a strange inclusion. But I will say
it's out of nowhere.
I want to make sure I have my episode straight. But you and I talked about there is actually an episode confronting that.
The trial.
Batman,
the trial goes hard for that.
Right.
Yes.
There's the trial, and what was it? It was I Am the Night. It was one of those episodes where it's basically like this very Batman philosophically just like lost.
Oh, where he was thinking about quitting. Yeah, like they sell me on T-shirts and stuff. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's been covered before, so maybe I shouldn't worry about it because they've at least talked about it. But it was a very weird inclusion. I did find it funny, though.
It is funny. I am 1,000% ready to own the fact that it is the Batman discourse that makes me roll my eyes a little bit, you know, because boy, am I tired of hearing the laziest Batman take ever, which is just let Bruce Wayne pay taxes. Cool stuff, guys. Cool stuff.
It was I Am the Night. So, listeners, if you really want to hear us talk about Batman criminal justice system, listen to our talk on The Trial or I Am the Night, because I feel like we get way more in the weeds on it in those episodes.
Those were fantastic episodes of Batman the Animated Series, and I think we had really great insights and conversations about them. I would recommend both our episodes and their episodes about those.
Yep.
I want to point out just a couple of things in passing before we wrap up the episode. The priest on TV, when Bruce Wayne is giving away all the money, is 100% Father Michael from It's Never Too Late.
Yes, definitely. I had the same thought, actually. I thought that was a really neat cameo. Just sprinkling it in there. Good for, like, longtime viewers.
And then my last bit, because this is becoming a thing with me, there is yet more Cape disrespect, and guys, knock it off. I'm going to be mad about it. I'm fitting to be salty.
Yeah. I made a similar note too. So apparently it's the Cape disrespect is one thing. I'm like, okay, well, whatever. But what blew my mind just as much as the whole, we're going to use his cape to pin him down, was how slow Batman reacted. It was like he waited for them to leave, and then he pulled out his batarang. I was like, dude, come on. You can think faster on your feet than that.
It's an example where freezing his foot to the ground would have actually made more sense, because he could have spent that time literally hammering at that ice with a batarang, and we would have understood it better. But here, they not only tug on Batman's cape, which I'm hitting my limit with, you guys. My ever-loving limit is reached with this Cape disrespect, but it also kind of makes him look like a doofus. It's not good. It's not great.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's about that about covers everything on there. I just thought that was a weird choice. Oh, I did think the one visual that I found particularly striking was the wall of doctors being hung up on meat hooks in a freezer.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, holy smokes, this is, again, I know this is children's television and it's not gory. It's just like when you look at that image, I'm like, holy smokes, this is dark. He's hanging people on meat hooks in freezers. Ooh, yikes.
In any other piece of Batman media that was aimed a little higher, like to adults, they would all be dead and hanging on those hooks in a meat locker, right? So here, when we bring our kind of more adult eyes to it, it's like, okay, those guys are still alive, but dang, this is, pardon the pun, chilling. This is good stuff.
Yeah. So good work from writing animation team on that piece. Anything else, Joshua?
I had one more thing, because it's becoming a bit of a theme between both Superman and Batman.
Yes.
We have what I'm kind of jokingly refer to as the Universal Monsters style ending. We had it with Toyman when they had a cracked mask but no body. We have it here where we have a body but no head, which is the important part with Mr. Freeze. And we'll do it again next week with the Parasite, where they basically end the episode with a scene or an appearance or something that might as well be capital THEEND, the end ?
Oh, yeah.
And
that's
I like
a great point.
It's good. They should keep doing it, but I like how deliberately they're doing it in these episodes that we're looking at.
Yeah, I love that. And again, I think it just speaks to what you mentioned earlier, that you can tell they're thinking about the continuity of the show differently, as opposed to making these like standalone episodes or maybe a two-parter. It really is like, okay, so the hero won this fight, but you haven't seen the last of this guy yet.
Right.
He'll be back.
We know it's true every time, but they're putting it on the label in a really suspenseful way. I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I too am a fan. So stay tuned until next time when we see Mr. Freeze again. It might be a while, but we will, as the episode lets you know, he'll be back.
Well, Caleb, I think that's about wraps us up. Let's end with alternative media recommendations, as we so often do. If people like what they see in Cold Comfort, do you have something else that they should watch or read or experience or play or whatever? What's your thoughts?
Okay, so I have 3. One of them's not very good. 2 of them are good, but are like less on brand, on label for this episode. So first and foremost, the one that's kind of goofy is The Day After Tomorrow, a Roland Emmerich film from like, I want to say the early aughts. It's got like Jake Gyllenhaal and Dennis Quaid. It's a movie about climate change and how like natural disasters are destroying everything. It's fun, it's goofy, it's stupid. If you're familiar with Roland Emmerich, He also did the 90s Godzilla film and Independence Day in 2012. It's his brand of crazy. I don't think it's good, but it sure is a lot of fun. And again, baby Jake Gyllenhaal is a sight to be seen. My second one is a more recent movie called Arctic, starring Mads Mikkelsen. And I played Death Stranding. It's a new video game from Hideo Kojima. He's a legendary video game designer. And Mads Mikkelsen plays a very prominent role in that game. So I've had Mads on the brain quite a bit. Not to mention that Mads Mikkelsen just sounds like a Batman villain name. So it's a movie. It's like a man versus wilderness story simply called Arctic. He's basically in a plane crash, and it's the whole like man versus nature thing. Not particularly original, just really well crafted. And if you're a Mads Mikkelsen fan, I think it's a good fit. And last but not least, I do have another recommendation about a movie. Another movie about revenge is a dish better served cold, except for you're actually rooting for the people getting their revenge, and it's called The Handmaiden, which is a Korean film from the director Park Chan-wook. It came out a couple of years ago, and I won't say much because I really feel like you should go in as blind as possible, but just know it's a movie about revenge. It is set in a Japan and occupied Korea, and it is about a woman slash women who are hell-bent on vengeance, and they may or may not be burning down the patriarchy. It's pretty great, and it's a very intricately woven tale. You'll see, if you watch the movie, which I highly recommend. It's very underseen. It's not just a simple like they're going around killing people. It is like a whole how do we like undermine this structure that is holding us down to get what we want. And so again, that is The Handmaiden from 2017 from Korean director Park Chan-wook. Joshua, how about you? Any other alternate media recommendations?
I also have a couple of movies, one based on vengeance and one based upon nihilistic hopelessness. Now, here's a shock. The one that has a heavy theme of nihilism and hopelessness, Iron Man 2.
Oh, really? I had never thought about it.
Superhero piece, right? So I'm on brand for myself there. The underrated Iron Man movie. And Tony Stark is dying in it. He's dying for almost the entire movie, and you can tell by the way he's acting. Like, I'm going to say a bit of a trigger warning if you haven't thought about it this way, but a lot of the way that he acts as a terminal patient are very similar to the sort of red flags that you might get if a loved one were having suicidal ideation. He starts giving things away that are clearly precious to him. Like his entire company, like an Iron Man armor. He just gives this stuff away. He clearly doesn't care. And it's all because he's dying. And not only is he dying, so it's a little bit like a terminal disease, but he's killing himself by using the Iron Man armor, but he won't stop. He's killing himself faster, at least. So it's a shocking undercurrent considering the tone of the rest of that movie.
Yeah, no, I think that, I hadn't considered that recommendation, but yeah, so him using the Iron Man armor actually kills him faster. I think that's an interesting idea. And if I recall, Joshua, and I don't want to speak out here, but I do believe while it doesn't tackle alcoholism head on, it also sort of touches on that character's alcoholism issue, right?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So comic book Tony Stark is a recovering alcoholic. They did a big story, I want to say in the early 80s called Demon in a Bottle, that really took him wallowing in it, like really just existing in an alcoholic state before he started his recovery, and how that led to damage and deaths when he was in the Iron Man armor. And I'm actually very glad that they didn't go that route for MCU Tony, but we still get to a lot of the same kind of self-destructive space in this movie in a more sympathetic way, I think. That it's him saving his life that's killing him slowly, and it's him saving other people's lives that's killing him quickly. Like, that's really poignant in a way that I think I'm self-destructive and just drink myself to near death is not. That was a very interesting story. Demon in a Bottle was a big Marvel turning point, and no shade on it, but I think I like the way that they adapted that to the MCU a lot better.
All right, very cool. That is an unexpected recommendation, but I like it a lot. What was your other recommendation?
So my other one is all vengeance focused, but the tone is completely different. I'm going for Mel Gibson in Payback.
Ooh, holy smokes. Yeah, that's a good one.
So Payback is based on a Richard Stark novel that is about an ongoing character who is just an unrepentant criminal, but he's a professional criminal. And he comes back after someone tried to kill him, after his partner and best friend tried to kill him, and he comes back to collect his $40,000. And that's what he wants, and he doesn't care who he has to go through to get it, even to the point that when people offer him more money, he says, no, I just want what I'm owed. And while that's a very different type of revenge than what Mr. Freeze is going for, the single-minded approach to it, I felt was very similar, even if, like I say, the way it plays out and the tone of that film is very, very different.
That's unexpected. I hadn't thought about that. But you know what? I would say Mel Gibson feelings aside, that is it aligns very closely with what we see in this episode. So good pick.
Yeah, listen, guys, Mel Gibson is a garbage human being. I don't necessarily recommend being friends with him, but that movie is like 25 years old, and it's amazing, and I highly recommend it, despite the fact that Mel Gibson is in it. But you've got to make your own choices and your own mileage. That about wraps it up for this animated discussion. If you enjoyed this conversation and would like to join in, come find us on Twitter. Caleb is at CMastersTalk, and I am at Joshua Unruh, and the hashtag is Animated Discussion. Caleb, where else can people find you?
Well, I'm the editor-in-chief and contributor at the Cinematropolis, a website that specializes in in-depth film critique and analysis, and also the host of the Cinematropolis podcast, The Cinematic Schematic. We publish in-depth essays on all types of films, and you can find all those articles at thecinematropolis.com.
Remember that an animated discussion is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/pulpdictionproductions. Show your support by pledging at Patreon or by leaving a great review on Apple Podcasts to make it easier for more people to find us and join in the discussion.
And of course, the links to Patreon, Apple Podcasts, our recommendations, and Twitter are all going to be easy to find in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us for this animated discussion. We'll be back next time to talk about Superman, the animated series, the episode Feeding Time.
We'll see you back here. Same bat time, same bat channel.